I am delighted to kick off our first speakers event of this year's Stone Center for Inequality Dynamics. If this is your first time at a CID event, raise your hand. Yeah, I'm so excited to see so many of you here that we haven't had a chance to get to know yet. We would love to tell you more about what we do here at the Center for Inequality Dynamics. You're welcome to talk to me or any of the other affiliates and associates of CID. If you're an affiliate or associate of CID, student, faculty, staff, raise your hand. So come say hi to us, tell us about yourselves. We are so happy to have you with us. And we're very happy to have with us today Angelina Grigoryeva, who is a PhD from Princeton University and currently an assistant professor at Toronto. Her work is really at the intersection of economic sociology and social stratification. And that's a real place where I think the Center for Inequality Dynamics wants to exist and try to make contributions. So you're the perfect person to try to bring together some of these different approaches to studying inequality that we really strive to invest in here. Angelina has published multiple times in both ASR and AJS, so there's not much else that needs to be said about her publication record, but she studies the financialization of the US economy in various ways and the implications for inequality, as well as some work on family-related forms of inequality. She is our inaugural Visiting Fellow. This is a fellowship that CID offers to tenure-track, but not yet tenured faculty members outside Michigan. If they're going to be on sabbatical for a semester anyway, we kick in the other half to fund them for an entire year of sabbatical. The applications for next year's Visiting Fellow are up now, so you can retweet us on X. You can send an email to people you know who might be interested. We really want to get a disciplinarily broad set of applicants, so you can help us out by spreading the word. And with that, I'll turn it over to Angelina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sasha, for the very welcoming introduction. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. I'm very, very excited to be here. It's an honor to be the first fellow, and the CID is just simply amazing. So I'm really excited to be here. So I think I'm just going to stay here so that everyone can see the screen. If I get too excited in your way, please just let me know. I also tend to be a bit of a soft-spoken person, so if you cannot hear me in the back, just please let me know, okay? So Louis, I'm going to share. So I really love this clock because it gives me lots of time, but I'll try to be very careful with that. In my work, I draw on insights from economic sociology to advance our understanding of social inequality using quantitative methods. And some research takes up a major historical change in compensation practice. But can you hear me? I'm going to stay here, if that's okay. So my research takes up a major historical change in compensation practices, and I'm talking about a shift from regular cash wages to compensation that is based. So in my work, I focus on the social, profound economic transformation for workers' well-being, firms, or social inequality at large. So today in my presentation, I'll give you an overview of the shift to social. Talk about the implications for wealth inequality, for gender inequality. Can you still hear me? Perfect. Is it?
Yeah, wherever you want.
I apologize. It was not very good at speaking very loud. So I'm sure all of you know that inequality in the United States increased on multiple dimensions, but it increased the most for wealth. Wealth disparities in America are really fun. So America is now the richest democracy with the worst wealth inequality. For wealth inequality by gender is especially large. So some estimates show that women had only 68 cents for every dollar owned by men. This is a really drastic gap. So in the inequality literature, research focuses on the amount of forward. The more money you make, the more money you accumulate. So the focus on wages reflects broader focus on essentially the focus is on the amount of money. And so as the saying goes, a dollar is a dollar is a dollar, right? Classical sociological writing by Johann Silva or Max Weber. However, economic sociologists come in and they argue that not all dollars are the same. And so we even have, this charged labels where we talk about good debt and bad debt. But we think about learning that is wealth building and promoting wealth accumulation. Credit card debt, that's something that can share, like that can, entail anxiety, stress, and sometimes even social shame. Right? So we discriminate between these different types of debt, and potentially they have different implications for inequality processes outcomes. So what I argue is that not only how much money you need, but kind of earnings you need, maybe. I want to introduce stock-based compensation as a novel problem. This actually spread far more broadly in the American economy than it is commonly assumed. So in the 1980s, less than 12% of Americans had stock-based compensation. By the early 2020s, this number doubled. So right now, 23% of workers in the United States have stock-based compensation. For reference, this is 3 times higher than the share of unionized workers. So here on the slide, you can see that we can trace the trend. Best data we have comes from the general social survey. And you can see that the number of employees with stock-based compensation increased consistently in the past couple of decades, except the slight decline following the financial crisis. Okay, so stock-based compensations represent various in companies across the companies of various sizes. So employees who receive stock-based compensation, they vary from executives in Fortune 500 companies to engineers in high-tech firms to even baristas at Starbucks. If it's a real Starbucks, not a franchise, baristas are eligible for stock-based compensation. I do not get any commission from this company. I will be talking about Netflix. I would like a commission from that, Netflix. I'm also happy to talk about other examples of medium-sized companies, like maybe you like Greek yogurt Chobani or Bob's Treadmill, I like muesli. So that's another example. Of course, small companies, tech startups, they provide stock-based compensation as a way to attract staff. Okay, so how can we think about stock-based compensation from a theoretical perspective? So first of all, in the course of financialization of the US economy, money expanded beyond cash goods. So one way to think about it is if you're familiar with macroeconomic models that with values, and we use this more. They count, for example, mutual funds and money market accounts towards what they consider money mass. So their fight on inflation was quantitative tightening. So that's where you would hear about this aggregate monetary aggregates. Another example from our lives is that if you have stock investments, you think of it as money, right? Like as compared to how. Okay, I'm walking to my pile of cash that's worth that amount of money, right? But when when you check your bank accounts, when you see stocks, it's still kind of like in show you like it shows you the dollar amount of your stock investments rather than like number of stocks you have, right? So that's a way to think about how what we consider and what we define as money has expanded beyond cash. So we know that one of the major, most important manifestations of financialization was the American generate profits. But the focus on stock-based compensation shows that American firms are all to pay very well. And also financialization has economic lives of ordinary Americans. Americans are increasingly involved in the stock market through pensions and also through. But the prevalence of stock-based compensation shows that it's also another increasingly important aspect of the stock market. For firms, stock-based compensation is attractive because there is out. So if I want to compensate employees with stock-based compensation, taking cash out of my budget. Again, just to clarify, we don't really want to confuse anyone and go into detail. This is not free money, right? Stock-based compensation is still sounded in CNL, but you don't get money out of the cash budget, right? Like it comes kind of from a different thing that gives you a bit more flexibility for how you can attract. And also, research in the management literature shows that stock-based compensation is associated with a number of positive firm-level outcomes, and I'm talking about greater productivity, innovatedness. Also, again, from the management literature, we know that workers with stock-based job satisfaction, greater job security. So here I expand this focus from workplace outcomes to outcomes for workers beyond work. And I focus on these sort of, you might come across stories in media about how people became rich from stock-based compensation, right? And so this red kind of rectangulars in the slide that's added by me, you might have heard of these stories. Of course, some companies, Google, other companies fail. So when Enron went belly up, employees lost their employment and stock-based compensation. When United Airlines went bankrupt, again, their employees lost their stock-based compensation. However, when we look at the performance, receive stock-based compensation, they receive a stake in the stock market, and they receive this asset with the highest average expected rates of value appreciation over time. That was a very complicated phrase. I had to So another mechanism for which stock-based compensation can promote wealth accumulation is that it combines capital and labor income, because employees can get additional income from dividend payments and share. So from a theoretical perspective, actually stock-based compensation blurs this distinction between capital and labor, like Karl Marx was talking about. When employees get stock-based compensation, they receive an ownership. See, it's stakeholder voting. They encourage making decisions, but it's still like a blurs this distinction in capital. All tax system treats stock-based compensation more favorably because there is a lower tax rate on capital gains from stock-based compensation than for earned income. Overall, we can expect that stock-based employees with stock-based compensation, they benefit from this long-run transfer to capital that we have seen in the US as several decades. Fact that the wealth gaps between employees with and without stock-based compensation, they widen over time, again, as a result of this market
which in turn was a result of financial deregulation, corporate monetary policies in the 1980s. And here I would just refer you to your own grad talk more about it. However, we might expect that the wealth benefits of stock-based compensation will not be the same for men and women. And here there are two features of stock-based compensation that are relevant. But using Netflix as an example, are now offers 52 weeks. So I just want everyone to kind of like 52 weeks, it's a year, it's a full year. So I'm from Canada. This is very generous, even for Canada. So this sounds fantastic, eh? Not so much when it comes to stock-based compensation. So unlike wages, stock-based compensation is not paid on a monthly or bi-weekly basis, usually annual basis, once a year. And so what happens is if you are not an active service, you're on leave during this annual granting cycle, or immediately before, like in the time before it, you're disqualified. Many companies, you're not eligible to receive stock. So with stock-based compensation, there is a so-called vesting period, which means that after you receive stock-based compensation, until you get vested, actually get to own your stock-based compensation. To work your stock-based, to work vesting, the vesting of your stock-based compensation. We also know that women are more likely to take family leaves, which means that women are more likely to benefit of stock-based compensation. And essentially, that places them kind of like on a lower and different lower wealth accumulation. Here, I think there are some interesting theoretical points because it has this built-in motherhood penalty. So if you think about wages and the motherhood penalty of wages operating as a result of discrimination on the side of employment. Others, like motherhood status, clashes with this ideal of women. Right, but if we face discrimination, we will not have. Here, with stock-based compensation, like up as an institution, it has this motherhood penalty built. It's a very simple I'll refer you to the one here that like the algorithms, the way this institution even in like in this in a perfect world with no discrimination, we would still see how it's set up. And so I think in this respect, it's just very interesting from a practical perspective, this distinction between stock-based compensation. I will show you some empirical analysis for another method for which man can benefit more from, because stock-based compensation, unlike other types of non-wage compensation, such as 401k plans, stock-based compensation requires employees to take deliberate steps. So with your pension plans, like 401k plans, they're actually managed for you professionally on behalf of employees, right? With stock-based compensation, that's not the case. So again, I'm going to use Starbucks. I don't have any the error on the slide is something that I added just to highlight because it's a busy slide. You will see that they want to benefit from stock-based compensation. Right. Another example of a company that is T-Mobile, the cellular service company. Educating employees about how they can benefit from it. But again, employees need to take deliberate steps to benefit from stock-based compensation. that men are more likely to utilize the wealth building potential of stock-based compensation as structural and cultural processes that push men towards the stock market and women away. Men in general are more likely to participate in the stock market, are more likely to major in finance and economics, they're more likely to work in the finance sector. Outside of the workplace, they're more likely to be in charge of family investments, they're more likely to be taught about family finances by their parents, and they're also more likely to gain financial know-how from their other male peers in their social life. By contrast, women are more likely, which might result in institutional. I focus on three research questions in this talk. The first is, does stock-based compensation promote greater wealth accumulation, widening disparities over time? Second, do men enjoy greater wealth benefits from stock-based compensation than women? And finally, are men more likely to take advantage of the wealth building potential? I'm using two different data sets to answer these questions. Start with the first question, does stock-based compensation promote greater wealth accumulation with widening disparities over time? Using the survey of consumer finances, has the best data on wealth, and it also has very high quality data on stock-based compensation. The best data we have is the General Social Survey. Their data on wealth is not as great. I'll refer you to Sasha. Why that's the case? But the SCF estimates of stock-based compensation are very consistent with those in the GSS. So in all of the models, I control for total income, which includes regular wages plus the value, the estimated value of stock-based compensation. And I also control for job characteristics, including job quality, occupation, industry, and company size, and I control for gender absorption as well. This is an unadjusted wealth graph by stock-based compensation between employees with stock-based compensation at the top and employees without stock-based compensation. So we see here that in 2019, the gap was more than $50,000. Please remember this number. I'm going to refer to it in the next slide. Again, the gap is 100. So here I show how this gap varies across the distribution. So I showed you on the previous slide this gap at the median, and here I show how this gap varies across the distribution. Right. So on the previous slide I showed you two different lines, and here I kind of summarize it as one line and how the gap varies across the distribution. Does it make sense? It's perfect. So what we see here almost exponentially, and so at the bottom it's statistically significant, but less substantively important. At the top, it's almost 10, not 10 times, like way more. It's more than $1 million at the 90th percentile. Very substantial. So wealth gap increased over time. Here, the solid line shows you exactly the same line that I showed in the previous slide. And the dotted line at the bottom gives the estimates of the wealth gap by stock-based compensation in 2004. And what we see is that the gap expanded over time, with most action of the distribution, there was less action. Most of this action was at the top of the wealth. These are descriptive findings. I also want to see how stock-based compensation is associated with wealth accumulation. And so I'm going to take advantage of the SCF panel and the fact that in 2009, the SCF re-interviewed respondents from the 2007 wave. It's a very interesting period. It's very hard for me. Like, it's a difficult period to test my hypothesis that the stock-based compensation promotes wealth accumulation because of the stock market crash. And I'll talk about the implications of this specific study period when I'll show you. regression. Again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to refer you to Sasha. With a lag-dependent what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare baseline levels of wealth. I'm going to compare at the same baseline levels of wealth and other stock levels of wealth in 2009 varied between employees with and without stock business. So again, I'm comparing people with the same wealth and other variables, and I compare how their subsequent levels of wealth in 2009. These slides, I'm going to guide you guys through it. So this slide shows the estimates of this gap, how the gap in subsequent levels of wealth varies between employees with and without stock business across the wealth distribution. The solid line estimates this gap across the distribution. The dashed lines are the 95% confidence interval. There is that across the wealth distribution, so stock-based compensation is associated with greater wealth accumulation. So one way to estimate, to interpret this result is that if the share of employees with stock-based compensation in the sample increased by 10 percentage points, we would expect wealth at the 90th percentile to increase by $18,000, like this number divided by 10. So basically what we see here, if we don't go into numbers, is that stock-based compensation is indeed associated with great wealth. We might expect that in periods of macroeconomic growth and growth in the stock market, presumably in place with stock-based compensation would possible they would expect they would enjoy even greater benefits. Do men enjoy greater wealth benefits from stock-based compensation than women? So here I present unadjusted wealth gap by stock-based compensation and gender. There is a lot going on. I'm going to guide you through the slides. So first of all, regarding stock-based compensation, men have, just as a quick side note, these are results for the entire sample in the SCF. Still fare better, even when I look at the sample of the never married, where wealth isn't impacted by family formation. So men do better than women in terms of wealth ownership, regardless of stock-based compensation. Within each gender group, it's employees with stock-based compensation that have more wealth as compared to employees without stock-based compensation. So we see that for men. We see that for women. That men with stock-based compensation own more wealth than women with stock-based compensation. And that's kind of consistent with what we would expect. Now, what we see as we talked about before in the total sample, we have stock-based compensation positively associated. However, when we split the analysis separately from men and women, what we see is that this positive association is primarily driven by male workers in the sector. So this wealth benefit of stock-based compensation is primarily concentrated among men, actually, and are especially large at the top of the wealth distribution, at the higher end of the distribution. Why is this the case? One question is whether men, so one potential explanation likely to take advantage of the wealth building potential of stock-based compensation. To test this hypothesis, I use a survey, it's a restricted survey conducted by the National Bureau of Economic Research. It includes like a wealth of data on stock-based compensation. It's restricted because once you know the how stock-based compensation works for each company, it's actually quite easy. It's possible to identify the companies. In place from 14 American companies across different industries and sectors participate. Very large sample, but it's not a representative sample. However, for other research questions about stock-based compensation, we know that findings from this data set fall in the national representative general social security. So that kind of gives some peace of mind that the results based on this survey might not be might be informative more broadly. So I focus on one specific type of stock-based compensation. In basically the best data set I could find, and I think the best data set that exists. It's participation in employee stock purchase plans. It's a very common stock-based compensation. It's a federal requirement. Place to purchase plan, it has to do it on a or the company has to offer it to all employees who are employed full time and older and who are older than either 18 or 21. I apologize, I don't remember, but basically it's provided on a company-wide level to all full-time employees older than 18 or 20. So what we see here is are more likely to take advantage of the wealth building potential of stock-based compensation because they're more likely to participate in this type of stock-based stock-based compensation. And these are descriptive results. The difference of statistical significance. Okay. Excellent. So just to recap the summary of my findings, what we see is that stock-based compensation is associated with greater wealth gap between employees with and without stock-based compensation to widen poverty. Second, it is of the shift to stock-based compensation. And that's in part because men are more likely to take advantage of the wealth building potential of stock-based compensation. Spend a little bit of time talking about broader theoretical implications of this work. So first of all, this research points to stock-based compensation as a novel institutional mechanism of wealth and gender inequality in this new finance agreement. And also shows when we think about wealth inequality, it's informative to think about it through intersectional lens. There are meaningful sectional differences across the distribution. Compensation resulted in new types, novel types of compensation. So I know that in the inequality research we study wages a lot. I think it's important to move beyond wages to other types of finance driven capitalism. Here, economic sociology is handy because economic sociologists acknowledge its multiplicity of it's pretty common to actually refer to it as money. It's like so economic sociologists are very attuned to this qualitative concerned with distribution of output. Vice versa, the inequality research focuses on the distribution of attention to this heterogeneity in what money looks like in this new finance driven. Of money, but just from very, very different perspectives. And we should be friends, right? And we should talk to each other because there might be some meaningful insights. to address that, again, in this new finance-driven economy, where financial markets are more important, socio-economic shifted from labor to financial markets. But when we speak about classic theoretical models, or such as the Wisconsin model of economic activity, it's all about labor markets, but increasingly economic materiality in the labor market, but in financial markets. So perhaps it's time for us to revisit and rethink this classical model because they were developed before the rise of finance. And they were developed like when the economy looked really, really cheap. But right now, maybe stratification processes are shaped by different economic structures that we need to take into account in how we think. Stock-based compensation also talks about, at the same time, what we see is that there is this boundary between labor and financial markets. So here again, I want to go back to credit scores. Just like credit scores may hinder, actually promote participation in the stock market when it comes in the form of this interesting interplay between labor and financial markets, similar to the case of credit score. And finally, stock-based compensation boundary between labor and capital. I'm just going to a while that say that, you know what, Karl Marx talked about like this labor capital problem and this conflict between labor and capital. So stock-based compensation addresses it, right? Because we give employees an ownership stake and we give them stakeholder voting rights when they receive stock-based compensation. Because it's manifest for benefits. It's not everyone, right? So just giving an ownership stake apparently is not enough. Like there's I'm going to be bold and maybe it's time for us to rethink about what promo. And with that, I'm going to go and thank you very much, everyone.
What a time. I would love to hear every minute for us to have discussions. Great. They wish that the University of Michigan provided stock-based compensation. How do I go about it? Should I take questions? Do you want to or do you want us to handle it? Maybe you could handle it. Sure. That would be easier. 1 minute, 1 second.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm Irfan, I'm a second year geography student at Ford. Just a general question, during your research, what do you think of your proposal? Excellent, but like practically implement them.
Can you repeat
that question back? Just
So I think the question is about policy implications and how we can I was actually told, since I'm here, I was invited in April to the US Congress, although I think like Americans left Canada at the time. I was invited to speak about it, and what's something I found really interesting. That, there is bipartisan interest in stock as a way to address wealth inequality, and you see people so like Bernie Sanders, who really about providing those are people on very, very different. I see some people, yeah, people like him, I don't know what I'm but as much, now that I'm in Canada. There is a bipartisan support for that. I honestly think it's more from an organization here because remember when I told you that stock-based compensation is not free money. 2006, actually it wasn't the case, and stock-based compensation was like in the United States. But then in the United States, the accounting standard changed to bring it more in line with international standards. And that's how stock-based compensation started to be from institutional investors. So like what I'm trying to say is it's an organizational story in terms of like what is happening and how organizations globally involved for making this change happen. What I see both in the United States and Canada is a lot of interest. It's a very complicated issue, right? So in 2006, when it didn't happen overnight, but it's a very complicated stock-based compensation. There are both finance implications. So, like, it has to be consistent. And standardized these labor markets. So I think part of it is that there is a lot, but there has been a lot of interest. I know that so I know that you wanted to you know what I'm doing now and the time to talk to you because I plan to join the administration and I cleared my schedule, but you have that. So I don't have a specific answer for you. Like I can't point to any specific reason, but there's a lot of complicated features. Because you have to be compliant. You know, I think there is growing interest, and that's really
Yeah, Angelina, thanks so much. Unfortunately, I believe Shirley connected one of my question. With respect to the sort of thing at the end of showing different likelihood of participating in the plan, and can you talk a little bit about what that decision looks like, right? Like if the company offers this as a plan, like why would one choose not to participate? Like is there an alternative sort of compensation that you don't participate, you get? Related to that, right, I think it says something like 88% or 90% of men participate relative to something like 73%. Like, you should just talk a little bit about kind of what might be driving that in these data. Do you have the ability to evaluate some of those mechanisms we talked about? Is it the nature of the vesting schedule, the timing of network policy that you give me insight into sort of that?
So actually very simple. All you need to do to participate in this type of service, like when you're hired by University of Michigan, you want to participate. All you need to do is here for this specific type of service compensation. You know, all you need to do is enroll. And so what we see is differences in involvement. That's partially why I like this analysis because everyone is eligible to come.
But if I don't enroll, like if I'm getting 50,000 stock options,
Yeah.
if I roll, do I get an extra 10 grand if I don't enroll? So the not participating is actually just leaving money on the table.
Exactly. It's just like it's get less in another type. No. They still multiple type of basic compensation. Sometimes actually just at all. There are no wage concessions on the top of this. It's just like with a condition of pays you less if you enroll. That's not the case. People should not enroll. I think part of it, like I mentioned T-Mobile, that's like an exemplary company where they have levels of stock-based compensation participation. Unique. As interest, companies might have less of an incentive. You can make an argument. Explain to their employees, like, you know, so that their HR results. But usually these stock-based compensation plans are implemented not by T-Mobile, it's implemented by, which has an incentive to explain to employees that, hey, come with, because that's how Fidelity gets money. One place participate. Their profits directly not me. Finance companies, big finance institutions that have an incentive to bring people in place to explain how it works. So the barrier to participate. Some and here I'm not talking, and that's the kind of inequality in wages, but I hope you use the Glassdoor data and this compensation to really look at these.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stand so I can see everyone who has their hands up. I saw Caleb and then Trouble, Neil, right? Everybody? Right.
Good talk, Angelina, this was fantastic. I mean, it's one more analysis question. When you were looking at the SCM, at the median and above, having SBC was associated with like really large differences in wealth accumulation, like just across those few years. I assume those differences are a lot bigger than what people are getting from SBC directly. Is that true, or is that like, I don't know, at least at the top, is that an amount of compensation they could be getting from SBC? And if not, what other kinds of wealth accumulation is like associated with this? That's explaining that difference.
So basically you're asking, is this
If it's all
really
SBC,
huge number,
yeah.
is this all SBC? Shift to stock-based compensation. Here I focus on the general workforce. Another way to think about it, it's very interesting to focus on highest paid workers because they amass so many resources. We also know that executive compensation skyrocketed over time. Actually, if you look at its components, the cash compensation of executive, but it's stock-based compensation that increased at the top of the world. They get most of it. I do think that these numbers, these are the 90th percentile. I don't think we can even make either case that this is on the lower end versus in a higher end in terms of whether it's just for basic. Because when we think highest paid employees, workers, there was really this swing from cash to stock. Right now, cash compensation for highest paid executives, people in these where people. But I like to point that. So, and I'm also going to use the example of Starbucks. So Starbucks recently, their stock market went down. Chipotle is a very, very successful business, even though it's a restaurant business, and that's a very, like, it's very hard to succeed in this restaurant business. So they offered him, they offered him $20 million and then just as a sign-up bonus. It sounds like a lot, right? But stands compared to the stock-based compensation that he got, because the moment he got hired, it was announced publicly. Dave said, and he got a slice of that. Right? So this $20 million sign-up bonus was compared to what he got for stock-based. Now, if I could make another example, I was in Canada when COVID happened, and so I remember thinking the way the COVID pandemic, the way we know it, when I read the news that the CEO sold his waste company. So I remember I saw that, like, okay, like if you think there is no more upside for you, maybe there's something informative. This decision. I do think that I do try to like this model adjusts for a number of
up to your answer to the one. So I was wondering, I mean, the analogy with the pension system is not perfect because usually it's matching funds. And so there's a cost, an actual cost for you as an employee. And money today, you may, say, okay, I'm losing 5% of my salary because I'm not, but there is an explanation. Here doesn't seem to be that kind of mechanism. So, right? So I'm wondering how confident you are about the eligibility information, because it seems pretty astounding that 10% of men and 30% of women are just deciding not to take the money, right? Like it's in the kind of pension, there is an explanation. Well, the explanation here could be all about information or time constraints for choosing what I don't know, but it seems kind of hard to believe in a sense, right? And so how confident you are about the eligibility information? Because that could be an issue. Some more women are part-time, but it's not well measured, and then they are not really eligible or stuff like that. That's one question. And the other, I was trying to identify better in my mind. There is a causal argument here, and it's about some kind of causal effect of but I couldn't really identify clearly in my mind the counterfactual involved. So if you it may be a little bit unfair to ask you to do it very quickly.
Sure. In terms of the gender gap in participation, here we're on employees who are eligible. So we're only comparing employees who are eligible, and we still see this gap.
The question is how confident you are about the eligibility information, because this seems this is astounding, right?
Yeah,
not just not that the gender difference, just that, what is it? 15% of men are just deciding, and 30% of women decided to forfeit thousands of dollars potentially, right?
Well, so what I like about this data set is matched employer-employee data. So I do know from the whether employees participate or not. So it's kind of like I have information both and employees.
Yeah.
So in terms of the measurement, I'm pretty confident actually.
What about eligibility?
I do have that data from employers as well. I know like from HR whether employees are eligible or not. So we're only looking at eligible employees. Another way to think about it is that 86% of men do choose to participate, and that's a lot. But you're right that some people don't participate. So I'm confident in terms of the measurement that this is the real number. But there are some barriers to why people don't know. It's money on the table. They should. They definitely should. It's money on the table. Like There is some research in economics about inertia in participation in 401k plans. So when people stick not to the best financial decisions for them, but for the ones that are offered to them by their employer by default. And people just stick to them, even if it's not the best financial decision. So, like in terms of the measurement, I'm pretty confident, but there is something there in September, right? And
Just about it, so I'll take the last two folks that
I do have an answer for the other one.
And maybe let's do both questions in a row, and then Angelina, you can do like a lightning answer, and then we can of course continue to.
To insert we have the practices, financial practices of people once they take the money from the table.
Say it again, sorry?
The financial practices that people exercise once they take stock options, meaning do they sell them to get some more income? Do they sell some and buy other stocks from other companies? Do they keep them? I'm thinking about the biggest experiment in democratizing shareholding in history, right? So with the collapse of the Soviet Union, where so many people just sell their stocks to get cash, and we have a class of oligarchy regime. How much of this can be explained with people super serving here can be explained by
Yeah, so yeah, you may have already controlled it in the research, but I think part of it, I'm just thinking about the different data classifications. The financialization certainly is associated with the rise of the high-tech industry. So I wonder to what degree this like wealth inequality you observe, maybe due to differences for men and women. People have careers in different sectors, like those of us who work for nonprofit, we don't get those, right? Yeah. So I don't know.
Answer quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Analysis has shown that people receive stock-based compensation. It socializes them into greater stock market participation. So if I give you $10,000 stock and you are stock, what I will see for you is that you might, I actually don't know if you will keep it or not. I didn't look at that, I'll be honest. But I will see that separately from that, you will invest more money in the stock market as compared to when you didn't receive any stock. It's one example. Another example, I think that, and another line of my research, I study urban ecology, urban social organization. I think that there is a connection between stock-based compensation, urban inequality, because what I hear with inequality, I don't have numbers, but what I hear is that many places say that women for their first house. Which is a company that structure for companies to implement stock-based compensation. They published some geographic data about how stock-based with this quantitative data in the cities that have seen explosive growth in the house. I do think there is not a perfect causal story, but I do think that what happened is people started receiving stock-based compensation, they used it to buy their houses, and then the housing market started growing. But that's just based on my qualitative kind of stuff. And here I agree, occupation is important. I think that even though I'm kind of trying to make the case that stock-based compensation, it's not limited just to like super rich white college educated men. It is concentrated in some social groups more than others, and in some occupations more than others. So I agree that occupational analysis, I think, is very important. Great, thank you very much, everyone.